Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Parenting Strategies for Children During Challenging Times. I'm Dr. Rachel Goldman. I'm a psychologist at Weill, Cornell, and I'm excited to speak with all of you today. I'm here with,
Go ahead. I was going to say I'm Avital Falk. I'm also a psychologist here at Weill Cornell, and both Rachel and I are part of the we are part of the Youth Anxiety Center, but also the Pediatric OCD Anxiety and Tic Disorders Program, or POCAT. And this workshop is a collaboration between both YAC, the Youth Anxiety Center, as well as POCAT.
So this is part one of a several-day series. So we're going to be talking about modeling healthy coping, understanding anxiety in children, and learning ways to communicate with your children. If at any point something is not clear, please use the Q&A to type your questions, and we're going to do our best to address your questions in real time today. But again, this is just part one of a series. There's more upcoming webinars that we're going to talk about at the end. So if we don't cover your topic today, you can let us know in the feedback survey, and we'll do our best to get to it in the upcoming webinars. So these are really uniquely challenging times. What is going on? Who could have ever imagined being stuck at home and facing working from home, taking care of your kids, managing schooling, perhaps facing job uncertainty or financial strains, and also having anxiety for partners or family members or friends with essential jobs during this time. These times are truly unprecedented and are really filled with uncertainty. There's an overwhelming abundance of information from all sources, and we're going to try to help you navigate through some of that. We understand that everyone is home all the time right now, and that this can pose an array of challenges, especially for parents as you're trying to navigate taking care of yourself as well as your entire family. So we're going to go through a survival guide for parents, really focused on putting your mask on first before helping others. The most crucial aspects of your schedule are activities that seem extremely obvious. Eating, drinking, and exercise, these are so important. And somehow they're also the easiest to forget about or to push off. So we're gonna start off with talking about putting your own mask on first before helping others, focusing on parent self-care before getting into any other strategies about helping your child. So you're best able to support your child when you're feeling good yourself. And full disclosure, we're both child psychologists, and we prioritize this because by caring for yourself, you are caring for your child. A number of experts have consistently said the number one thing right now and for your child's sense of well-being is that you remain as steady and stable as you can. So your children, no matter what age, are able to really pick up on your emotions. They're very perceptive, like little sponges. So what you're putting out into your home, they're absorbing. So we really want to make sure that you are taking the best care of yourself so that you can best support your child. So that all sounds really lovely and ideal, but how do we actually do that when we're stressed about managing work and homeschooling and there's a global pandemic going on? So starting with self-care, if you take away nothing else from today, let it be this, that your brain and body really need breaks in order to work well during this time. It doesn't need to be hour-long stretches on your own or like glamorous spa days, as none of that's realistic. It can just be really small parts of your daily routine that will help you feel better and more calm. One parent described having a 2 to 3 minute morning routine where they journal or they do a mindfulness exercise before they get their child out of their bed in the morning. So it can be really small things, from a healthy diet, brief exercise, music, sleep hygiene, getting some fresh air, or chatting with friends and family. Yet these things are really important so that you can feel your best to be able to take care of your children during this time. So in line with that, we also want to talk a little bit about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, specifically this idea that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all so connected. The way we're thinking about things affects how we feel, which affects what we do and how we behave. So, although your children can't read your mind, they can pick up on these little things. So, when we're thinking about things really negatively or unhelpfully, this can affect the way we're feeling and then acting towards others. So it's really, really helpful to identify your own thought patterns and emotions about this current situation so that you can then best support your child. So, like, just generally speaking, if you're having this persistent thought about your child getting sick, this might lead you to feel overly anxious and engage in behaviors of making them wash their hands even more extremely than the recommendations, possibly yelling at your child if they touch something, and then making them in turn increasingly more anxious about this situation as well. When in fact, the research is showing that most kids are doing okay. Yet that one sticky negative thought is starting a chain of events that may be inadvertently increasing anxiety in your child. There's a number of examples of this interplay, and we can always identify what our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are in a variety of situations. The takeaway point being, it's really important to identify what you're thinking about as a parent to understand how it's affecting your feelings and your behaviors in the day to day. This skill is also applicable to children. We often, in young children or older children, notice the behaviors first, perhaps tantruming, or they're more oppositional, unwilling to engage in something, but there are also thoughts and feelings under the surface there. And perhaps by you noticing and labeling your thoughts more, you can also help your child do the same. So, what do we do once we notice what our thoughts are and identify them? We really want to ask ourselves, are my thoughts 100% accurate, and are my thoughts helpful to me? Some negative thoughts, especially in this time, are accurate. Yet, and you can find evidence for the thoughts, yet you want to make sure that thinking about it in that way is helpful to you. For instance, if you're having the thought that your current situation is impossible to manage, you might be able to find some evidence that that thought is accurate. Yet continuing to harp on the impossibility of managing the situation, not sure that that's going to be super helpful to you in the moment. So instead, we don't need to flip our thoughts to be 100% positive or all rainbows and sunshine, because that's also not helpful. We just want to emphasize not making the situation worse by thinking even more extremely about what is going on. Our goal is really to think about the situation realistically and in a way that is helpful. So we'd want to be developing more neutral thoughts rather than thoughts like this is going to go on forever, trying to change the channel in your brain to recognize that this situation is tough right now and you're just going to focus on today. And that might influence your feelings and behaviors in a positive way.
There we go. So I'm going to hop in for this next question, but I just wanted to mention that I've seen a couple raised hands and a few things in the Q&A. So if you have your hand raised, we'd encourage you to put a question in the Q&A, though we may have some time at the very end for questions. In terms of the Q&A, we're going to try to answer some of those within our talk. And then if there are others that really weren't covered, if we have time, we're certainly going to address those at the end. So keep them coming. We are not ignoring them. We're just collecting them to make sure that we can answer the largest number of questions possible. So how do I help my child understand what's going on? That's been a question that's been coming up a lot for us. And the question is really, how do you talk to your children about coronavirus, about COVID-19? And I think often we're used to shielding our children from bad things. And yet, like Rachel was mentioning, your children are sponges and they're picking up on a lot of stress and a lot of the things that are going on. So we want to make sure that you're not afraid to talk about the coronavirus. Do you mind just skipping this? There we go. Don't be afraid to talk about the coronavirus. So most children, like I said, will have heard about it, even if they're not soaking it up from you, even if you're doing the most excellent job of keeping things calm at home. They see people around wearing face masks. They hear friends talking about it, depending on how old they are, possibly through Zoom or FaceTime, family members, etc. And not talking about something sometimes makes kids worry more. So we really encourage you to have open conversations with your kids. Talk to them about what they know or what they've heard. It's a great jumping off point. They can tell you what they've heard, and you don't have to worry about introducing something new. Make sure to use developmentally appropriate language, meaning explain it to them in terms that they can understand, and certainly validate whatever emotions they might be feeling, whether it's fear, whether it's worry. I think it's easy to say, oh, don't worry about that. Kids like you are really fine. But we want to really validate that this does feel really scary for them. And even if we are giving them reassuring things as well, we want to make sure that their fears are heard and understood.
Avital, can you touch on a little bit about what age, there's some questions about what age you can start talking to them about what's going on.
So let's skip to the next slide because I think that will cover that a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
So it really, as young as they come, you can start talking about it. Of course, we want to be careful about not to scare kids unnecessarily and not putting our own anxiety onto them, which brings us to a really big point that we want to emphasize throughout the entire talk today, which is that what you model and what you put out is going to help your kids the most. And so whether that's self-care in small spurts and in a way that is manageable to you, or the way that you're just going about your day-to-day life, that's going to really teach your kids something. So for toddlers and children in younger elementary school, you don't necessarily need to give a lot of details about what's going on or how it's caught or how many people are going to get sick unless they're asking questions about that. But we want to focus on modeling healthy behaviors and showing them that we're feeling okay and we're feeling calm and can manage scary things. And I'll come back to that in a second for an overarching tip. For once we get to upper elementary school or middle school or even older, of course, we still want to use the developmentally appropriate language, but we also want to make sure to be giving some more information, especially in response to questions that they may have that they are asking. You can ask open-ended questions. So instead of saying, are you afraid of this? Are you afraid of dying? Are you afraid of getting sick? You might just say, what are you afraid of? What are you thinking about? And that will help get a larger breadth of information from them about what might be scary to them. One thing I think across the board that we want to explain is that danger and safety are not two black and white things. And in fact, we can use things that we talk to our kids about every day to talk about this. So for example, this is a scary illness and it's scaring us as adults and it's probably scaring your children as children. And so we don't want to just say it's scary or it's not scary, it's dangerous or it's safe. But we do actually already have language to talk to our children about things that may not be safe all the time, but we have ways to make it safe. So for example, you would never have your kid cross the street alone. If they're, depending on how old they are, you might, but you wouldn't have them cross the street alone, or if they're older, without looking both ways and making sure to use the crosswalk or whatever it is. And even that example is one way of showing your kids, hey, this is a dangerous thing, but we have ways of making it safe and manageable. And I think when talking about coronavirus or COVID-19, you can say the same thing. This is a scary thing, yet we have ways of making it feel manageable and ways of keeping ourselves safe, like washing our hands, and you can teach them how often to do that, or like washing our clothing if you have somebody in your family who's going to a hospital and needs to do that. Whatever it is that's happening in your home, you can model it in that same way of saying, yes, this is scary and can be dangerous, but just like you hold your parent's hand when crossing the street, or you wait for the light to turn and use a crosswalk, similarly, we have safety measures we're taking here to make sure that you're okay.
So many parents asked about the long-term consequences of social distancing. And the truth is we don't have research on this specific situation, of course. But the research that we do have shows that in the face of traumatic events or changes in schedule, kids actually do really well. They tend to be really resilient and able to adapt to different situations. It's really important to understand that most toddlers and young children define a friend as just someone they can play with, whereas more school-age children can begin to understand that friends are people that they go to for support or for fun. So it's likely older children will struggle a bit more during this time of more social isolation. Yet older children also have way more tools to connect with their peers during this time. They're experts on social media and TikTok and FaceTiming. It's like way more their language than mine. And so they have a lot more skills to be able to manage this time period effectively. Younger children are more likely to be content about being home with their parents, and they might even be more accepting of social distancing. So they don't typically have like Avital said, they don't typically have the ability to understand current events and what's going on around them. So you should keep your explanations really simple. If your young child is asking over and over, can I see my grandparents or can I see a friend? You can simply say that we can't see them right now, but we can talk to them on the phone later. You can set up FaceTime with them and try to get creative on ways that they can still feel connected to others. Most research in the idea of how children regulate their own stress have really pointed out that children are with the very people they need the most right now during this stressful time. So just keeping that in mind as you notice your thoughts or worries coming up about how your child will respond within social distancing for a period of time.
So this is a question that we've been getting from some parents about why their child is asking the same question over and over and over again, and how to answer it when you feel like you've already answered it many times before. So we do want to point out that we just said you should be answering their questions and you should be talking about that. So when there's new questions, of course, we certainly want to pay attention to those, though we might want to solidify them and talk about them at a certain time of day. So just like you've probably been getting advice to limit the amount of time you're spending watching the news, maybe checking it a certain number of times per day. You can actually do this for your kids as well and say, actually, we're going to sit down and talk about it at this time. Or for a younger kid, they might not understand it, but you can say like, oh, we're going to have time to talk about this, and making sure that they can ask all of those new questions. But there is a difference between those new questions and what we call reassurance seeking, which are questions that are coming up over and over again for a very specific reason. And so what we actually know about this is that when kids are feeling worried, they tend to ask things. And then when they get some sort of reward, which in this case is actually a response to the question, it feels good, and that cycle continues. So it's the same idea as if your kid were to ask you for a cookie and you gave in, and then the next day they asked for another cookie and you said no, but then they screamed a little bit louder and you said, oh, all right, I can't deal with this. And you give them the cookie. What do they learn? They learn, hey, that worked. That was reinforced. The screaming for the cookie actually worked better. So they're going to keep doing it again if it gets them something that they want. So I want to just show you a little bit of what that cycle looks like. So we first, at the top in the red box, there's some sort of trigger. There's an unwanted thought, image, urge, or feeling that your child may be experiencing. So that might be a fear about the illness. It might just be wanting attention from you. And whatever it is going to cause an increase in their anxiety, which might be distress, fear, or worry. But this is actually a false alarm in the sense that they've already had this question answered. So they might be asking you again and again and again, you know, are you going to get sick? Are you going to get sick? Are you going to get sick? And you've answered it already. And therefore, this new question coming up isn't really a new question, and they don't actually need any new information. And that's what we mean by false alarm. If there's a behavior that answers that, which in this case would be reassurance from you, saying, no, sweetie, don't worry, we're taking all the precautions, or whatever that might be, that feels really, really good, and at least gives temporary relief, which is what's in that yellow box. So it feels good for that moment. But then 5 minutes later, they may get nervous again and start thinking, we're all going to get very sick. I have to ask my mom again, you know, are we going to get sick? Are you going to get sick? And the cycle continues because you've basically given them a reward or something that feels good in response to the question. So to break this cycle, what we actually want to do is limit the amount of time we're answering these types of questions. And so we don't want to be mean to our kids. We don't want to ignore them. We don't want to let them know that we're not paying attention to their questions, but we do want to let them know, hey, you've asked me that before, or you already know the answer to that. And then after that, staying silent, so that they learn asking the same question over and over again may not be the best behavior. And there are different and really good ways to get your attention. So, oh, sorry about that. So I think that this is just what I was saying at the very beginning of this question, that sometimes they are reassurance seeking, and those are the questions I was talking about, but some of them are not. So as soon as you hear a new question, you might want to think about, oh, that's something my kid is worried about, validate whatever emotion that they're feeling, and answer it either in that moment, or if you're trying to save questions and coronavirus topics for a certain time of day, say, hey, that's a really good question. Let's talk about it when we sit down and talk about all of your concerns. If you, like I was mentioning, your child is asking the same question over and over, needs you to answer in a very specific way with specific words in a specific format, that gives you a little bit of a clue that it might be reassurance seeking, and giving them those answers is actually not helping, but instead reinforcing the cycle and depriving them of the opportunity to be able to tolerate managing that distress for just a few minutes without you.
Do we want to just pause for a moment? Are there any questions specifically about this anxiety cycle? I know there were a lot of questions submitted about anxiety. So if there's anything that's not clear, we can take a pause to see if there's any specific questions.
Do you want them to type it in, or should we allow people who have hands raised?
Oh, I can't see the hands raised, but if you can, that would be great.
All right, hold on. So Chris, I see you there. Hold on, let's do this. Okay, you're good to go. Oh, you're still muted. Hold on. There you go, Chris. Oh,
he's still
it's not letting me unmute.
Here, let me see.
Okay, we might have to have you type it into the Q&A.
Here's a question. What if the child gets agitated when you don't answer them? So your child might get agitated in the beginning when you're not giving them that reassurance, because they've been accustomed to getting that temporary relief. So they might get a little bit agitated, and you can remind them that you understand that they have a concern and that they're asking the same question again, and that you're only going to answer it one time, or that you're going to distract them and direct them to another time when you can talk about their concerns more fully. So you're constraining the amount of time that you're answering the question over and over again gradually. Is there anything you would add to that, Avital?
So I just saw another question that's very related to that, of how this cycle can be broken. And I think it's that same answer, that there might be a little bit of an escalation when you try to break it at first, but if you let them ride it out with an explanation, you can certainly be kind and explain to them like, oh, that's not a question for now. We're working on you doing this on your own, or we're going to answer that later. And then giving a pause and ignoring it, which we'll talk about a little bit later in terms of tantrums and things like that. That, like I said, there might be a little escalation, but it might go up before it comes down, but eventually your child will learn that that's not an effective way to get your attention or to feel better, and they will turn to other strategies.
It also gives your child an opportunity to learn that they can tolerate the distress a little bit better than they think they can. So by not answering the question right away and giving them that temporary relief, it's actually building coping skills in your child for them to learn this is uncomfortable and I'm able to tolerate it. Okay.
I think there's a few more unanswered questions, but we're hoping to get to them through some of our planned material. So if you haven't been answered yet, that's because we're planning on getting to it, and we hopefully will have a little bit more time at the end as well.
So what are some strategies for motivating your child to engage in e-learning? There were a lot of questions about school across the developmental span, from really young kids to young adults. A lot of parents asking, like, how do I get my child to engage in their academics? So I'm going to give some tangible strategies, but first off, just a reminder that like schools are closed globally this is all children are in the same boat of trying to engage in learning in a way that they've never been asked to learn before. This is new for students and for teachers. So it's just good to keep in mind that this is uncharted territory for everyone. So just being kind to yourself and understanding towards your child that this is a new adventure. You can validate their emotions in describing, like, I know this isn't how you're used to learning, and this can feel really frustrating, yet we need to get through it. So again, going back to modeling, it's really great if you're able to set up a schedule, and tomorrow there is a full webinar on scheduling. But if you're able to set up a schedule where parents set boundaries around their work time for themselves and also work time for kids, again, you're modeling this healthy coping and this behavior that you want to see in your children. And a key part of scheduling fun activities, whether that's going outside, earning a sticker or a treat, after they've accomplished a small, manageable school task. So keeping in mind the basic principles of rewards. If you receive your paycheck before going to work, it's unlikely that you will be motivated to go to work. The same concepts apply for your kids. You want to reward them with any sort. It can be an external reward, whether it be a sticker or a snack or outdoor time or video games. It can also be just praise. So describing to them how proud you are that they were able to engage in their e-learning and engage in it, give them some positive attention for that. But that has to be done after they've completed a small, manageable task. And I really am emphasizing small, manageable tasks because this is really completely new for your child. And whenever we're learning a new behavior, we really want to start small so that they're able to build up confidence in their ability to achieve their goals. So by doing the hard stuff first and then adding some sort of reward afterwards. For younger children, you need to provide rewards more frequently and immediately after the behavior. So if they engage in doing, a half hour of reading, you'd want to give them the reward immediately after the reading task was completed. For older children, rewards can be spaced out more, and they do better with understanding concepts like, if you do your homework today, you can play video games later this evening. Older kids are able to delay their gratification longer than younger kids. With all of that said, and the goal might be in your house for your child to engage in their e-learning through their school, it's also important to keep in mind that there are really many ways that children can learn during this time, whether that's through their online class platforms, whether it's through outdoor time, cooking or baking with you, reading stories, playing with their siblings. So there's a variety of ways that children can be expanding their academics or their skills outside of just engaging in the Google Classroom or the e-learning.
There we go. This is something that we've had a few questions about. How do I balance multiple stressors? And we know that this is a stressful time, not just because of the illness itself, but also because of all the different things that are going on and what it might cause. So some people are experiencing significant financial strain, job loss, healthcare issues for themselves or of loved ones, possibly even deaths in the family. And then lots of people are having struggles that are not even related to this, but it's just multiple stressors at the same time. And I think that that's an important thing to focus on and to acknowledge. And some of the questions that I've received are, how do I do some of the other things that you've been recommending that we do, such as self-care, when I am worrying about these financial losses and worrying about putting food on the table? Or how do I do this when I'm suffering with my own things, like I'm panicking or having anxiety of my own, or I have an illness within my family or my spouse's family? So I think that we really want to talk about that. You shouldn't be aiming to do everything perfectly, because nobody can be doing everything perfectly right now. What you want to be doing is sending the message to your kids that you can take care of them, and that's what matters, and you're able to listen to and answer their questions. we're not asking you to hide everything from your children. So there's some question about, what do I do to tell my children that I'm worried, but that it's going to be okay? And I think that goes back to the same idea of that you can say this is dangerous and it's scary, and yet we're doing everything we can to protect ourselves. And that's what you need to be doing too. And as long as you're sharing things with your kids in order to give them information and answer the questions that they probably already have thought of themselves, that's great. And you should be sharing that information with them. Once it feels like you're sharing information or you're talking about things with them because you're struggling yourself, that's when we might actually think more about the self-care. And like Rachel said, when we talk about self-care, we don't mean going for a spa day. Well, not that people can do that right now anyway, but we certainly don't necessarily mean these big major things to do for yourself. We might just maybe even taking 5 minutes for yourself, spending a few extra minutes on the phone with a friend, calling a therapist. There's a lot of free resources right now, and we can try to get that out to you guys if there are people looking for that. And making sure that you're just taking even 2 minutes to spend some time on yourself, to breathe, to do whatever it is that you need to do, so that you can then face your kids with a face that's not hiding anything, but fresher in the face that you're choosing to represent to them.
So there were many questions about like, how in the world am I going to be able to manage all of this for this unknown amount of time? And I think overall, there's like an overarching theme of just needing to reduce expectations during this time. This is a time to focus on getting by. There's no need to like conquer the world during this time. A nice reminder that all the resources that are being put out on social media, I even myself find myself noticing, oh my gosh, I need to do all these different workout classes or bake all these different recipes or whatever is being pushed out there. You don't need to do it all. The most important things that parents can be doing right now is modeling healthy coping, being self-validating and taking care of yourself during this time, and setting small, achievable goals without feeling like you need to do everything that is being pushed out there via social media or the news. Just small, achievable goals.
All right. So, what are some strategies to deal with my child's emotional outbursts? And these can be over a lot of different things. It could be not getting candy during the middle of the day. It could be about, how they're responding when you're trying to do your work or put some boundaries in place, which I saw there was a question about. It could really be about anything. And before I answer this question, I just want to make sure that when we talk about emotional outbursts, we are talking about a large range of different behaviors. So if your child is experiencing emotional outbursts that seem like they might be harming themselves or others or property, and it feels like completely unmanageable in that sense, then we would recommend that you reach out for professional help. And I'm happy to provide my email to anybody who has questions and would like those types of resources. So right now, what I'm talking about is more on the attention-seeking tantrums, the ones that are really disruptive and bothersome, but are not necessarily dangerous in that way. So I just want to give a step back and give a little bit of background on what we call behavior management and some principles of how human behavior works. And so what we know about kids is that they do more of what works for them and they do less of what doesn't work for them. And actually, kids love attention. More than anything else, kids really, really want attention, and not just any attention, they want your attention as their parents. And what we actually know is that both positive and negative attention is reinforcing, meaning they like both of it. And you might be confused by that, saying my kid does not like being yelled at. However, they like that a lot better than being ignored, which is probably why some of you are running into this trouble of your kids coming in and disrupting your boundaries, even when you're not being particularly kind or sweet or giving them positive attention. what we know is that attention makes kids feel like, oh, they've gotten something from you, which is what they were looking for in that situation. And now I'm not saying all your kids are little masterminds. This isn't something that they're thinking of consciously of like, let me figure out how to get my mom's attention, but it's something that goes on and that we know is true of pretty much all children, that they are often seeking your attention, and that when you give it, whether it's yelling at them or positive attention, it actually is teaching them that it worked and they did get your attention. So what we really want to do is focus on praising the positive behaviors and the ones that we want to see more of, even if it feels a little bit silly. So if they do give you half an hour to do something and to take your work call, you might say to them, hey, I absolutely loved getting my space, and now I can't wait to spend some time with you. That was amazing. Even if you feel like that's something they should have been doing anyway, the more that you give them attention for the things you want to see more of, the better those things will get. On the flip side, we want to ignore the negative behaviors. And now, if this is something that you're not used to doing, you can certainly give them one warning about it and say, you know, I'd absolutely love to talk to you as soon as you're speaking calmly or at a certain time if they're interrupting you during your work or whatever it might be. But until then, I'm actually not going to be talking to you because this is not helpful. And then the second that they start behaving nicely, so let's say they were whining and whining and whining, but then they say very sweetly, hey mom, I have a question about dinner, which was appropriate in that situation. That's when you want to at least pretend to release all the anger and give them a ton of attention for speaking appropriately. And basically what we want to do is continue giving more and more attention to what we like to see and less attention to what we don't want to see. And a lot of people do ask me, does this mean you're condoning those behaviors? Are you saying it's okay? If I ignore it and I don't yell at them, am I saying it's okay? And the answer is a hard no on that. I can really guarantee that a kid not getting your attention does not learn that that's okay. They learn that, oh, that's not a way to get my mom's attention right now or to get my dad's attention right now. And that behavior over time will get less and less. One thing I should note is that similar to the reassurance seeking that we were talking about earlier, you might see it get worse before it gets better. So if you don't give in and give them the attention, they might try even harder. And only once they really, really learn that you mean business and that you're only going to give them attention when they're behaving appropriately, that's when they'll give up. But it might take a number of attempts, some escalation, even a number of days. So the more consistently that you can do this and keep explaining to them just with a one-liner, don't repeat it over and over, but hey, I would love to talk to you when you're speaking appropriately, that's going to help bring down those negative behaviors.
And just one thing to add to this, we want to make sure that we're really defining what we want to see in our children. So, but as opposed to saying like being a good girl or a good or a bad boy, like really defining what you want to see. I want to see my child. I want to see you using a calm voice, keeping our hands by our sides to ourselves, keeping the toys on the floor. So like really being very descriptive so that your child can learn exactly what positive behaviors you want to see in them.
Keep muting myself. To talk about special time. So this is just an extra way to infuse your household with some of that positive reinforcement or giving them attention for things that we want to see more of. And this, I think, can also speak to some of the questions about boundaries. And now, in some ways more than ever, you have to do so much. You're probably homeschooling a lot of your kids. You are trying to balance your jobs or trying to figure out what to do because of a loss of a job. There are so many different things that you're trying to manage all at the same time. And what that can lead to is that a lot of interactions are simply about getting your kid to the next task, getting them to eat dinner, getting them to bed, getting them to brush their teeth, whatever it might be. And what ends up falling to the wayside is just time that you're spending alone with your child. And many of you might be thinking, I don't have time to do that. And we definitely recognize that. And that's why it says on here, spend even 5 minutes a day that you set aside. If possible, it could be the same time each day so that it can be expected, where you say, look, we have so many things to do each day, but I want to make sure that I'm spending some time that's just about you. And during that time, your child gets to pick the activity and you just follow their lead. And we want to avoid questions, because questions is you giving them the lead of what you want to talk about or do. We want to avoid direct commands, which is telling them, oh, pick up those blocks or do this activity or do that, because we want them to feel like you're just there for them and following their lead. And we, of course, want to avoid any criticisms during this 5-minute time. And of course, you need to ask questions, you need to give commands, you need to criticisms all throughout the day. However, this is a time that your child can feel like is just theirs. And that's a time to praise, reflectively listen, fully enjoy the time with them, even though it's 5 minutes. And even though you might have a million other things to do before and after, that can be a really powerful time and can make your child feel like, okay, I know that there's special time to look forward to every single day.
So we have a few minutes left, about 5 minutes left, where we can answer some questions. Does anyone have some questions they want to put in the Q&A?
I see there's one there right now about dealing with a 20-year-old that won't leave the apartment to visit the other parent. And so I just want to address that. And some of the other webinars that are coming up will deal a little bit more with young adults. So I think that will be addressed in future webinars. And I also will provide my email to the person who asked that question in case they're not able to attend the future webinars or want some more resources about that.
Somebody asked about, can you talk about sibling rivalry? What specifically about sibling rivalry? I think understanding that this is a really tough time and that you guys, as all families, are spending way more time together than usual. And again, doing simple behavior management strategies of praising your kids when they're playing nicely together or calmly together, and ignoring escalations, allowing them to try to work it out unless it escalates where it becomes dangerous that you need to intervene. You can also, and this is coming up tomorrow, more about scheduling, but trying to have times during the day where if you have multiple children, they're still getting alone time. So whether it's for 15 or 20 minutes, they're allowed to read or play a game independently, and that's time be protected for them separate from their siblings. You might find that they then interact with their siblings more positively if it's not ongoing.
Are there any other questions that people would like addressed today or clarification on any of the material that we've presented? Oh, I see something. So Rachel was just talking about siblings, but the question is how to manage only children who might not have their friends or playmates that they usually have. And so this question is about an elementary school age child. And I think for that, we really want to think about that's an age where actually we can possibly use all the different telecommunications that we have to give them some increased sense of connection with their community, whether that be with friends, whether that's with an aunt or uncle or family member, and using platforms like Zoom or FaceTime and things like that to foster those connections. You might also need to make more of a schedule, and there will be questions, there will be future webinars, as it's up on the screen right now, about scheduling and things like that, which require you to maybe put in more time where you're interspersing, time alone versus time with you, especially if they don't have somebody else to interact with. Keep in mind that during school, if they have a virtual school, that is a time that they're interacting with other peers, even if it's not in person. And during the weekends might be more time that you can schedule more things for them, meal times as well. So I think that those are some tips, but please stay tuned for the scheduling one, which might answer that a bit more clearly.
I noticed that Talia's hand was up, so I'm going to see if I'm able to unmute. I don't know.
Oh, I see the question. So how do you answer a kid who really wants to go back to school and we don't know the answer? And I think this actually speaks to a much larger question about uncertainty that we're all facing. We don't know when we're going to be able to go back to work, back to school. have a new job, how long the social distancing will end, and how long it will go on for, when it will end. And I think it is a really difficult question. And I think you can say, I love that you love school. I love that you're excited to go back. And we actually don't know. And you can own that and say, we're really hoping that it's soon, but we don't know. And until then, what do you miss about school? How can we make this feel more connected for you? And I've heard of 3-year-olds using Zoom, even just seeing other kids for a minute or two, making a play date with parents and kids at the same time can be really nice if they're missing that. And figuring out, even for a 3-year-old, what it is that they miss. What are you sad about? What are you happy about? What do you love about school? And seeing what, of course, you can't do a perfect replacement, but seeing what you can give them.
So one parent asked about their child tending to give up or say they can't do it before even trying. Any tips? And sometimes that does happen, especially when kids are feeling really frustrated. And so what you can do is you can try to break down what you're asking them to do into really, really small steps so that it's like a snowball effect where they can start to feel that they're able to do it, and then maybe try something a little bit more challenging, but just making sure that the request of them is not too large and that they can feel confident by making progress in small ways.
So I'll answer one final question, and I think we're just about out of time, which is how to calm a child down if they're having a panic attack. And so, if they're truly having panic attacks on a regular basis, that might be a time to seek out outside help. However, if it feels like it's just a one-time thing that's happening in the home, or it feels minimal enough that you feel equipped to handle it, what we do want to tell them is that panic attacks themselves are not dangerous. This is your body's way of telling you that it's really scared. And right now, even though you're safe, your body feels really scared, and that this will pass, this will calm down, and basically teaching them that it's okay to feel these really, really scary, uncomfortable sensations. If they start developing fears of those sensations, or if those panic attacks really persist, then of course we want to make sure to get your child the longer term help and some different skills on board if they need it.
So thank you guys all so much for joining tonight. We hope you will join another upcoming webinar. There's one tomorrow and 3 next week. You can check our website or social media for all the up-to-date information. There will be a feedback survey at the end of this meeting that we hope you'll take a moment to complete so that we can tailor these webinars to best meet your needs during this time. But thank you guys all so much.
Oh, and depending on interest and feedback, we may repeat some of these series or have future Q&A sessions, even beyond the ones that are already planned. So please feel free to give us feedback or topics that you want to hear more about. Thanks for attending.
Thank you.